In the heart of America, a 15-year-old black teenager stood accused of a crime so small it should have been forgotten in a day. He was caught stealing nothing more than bread and cheese. But what unfolded inside that courtroom would silence every whisper, leave reporters stunned, and force even the judge himself to admit guilt. This wasn't just about theft. This was about survival, injustice, and a single verdict that shook the meaning of justice across the nation. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will leave you questioning the very system we trust to protect us all. In a quiet neighborhood grocery store on the edge of Chicago, an ordinary Tuesday turned extraordinary. Behind the counter, the shopkeeper noticed a young black teenager, barely 15, lingering longer than usual in the bread aisle. His clothes were worn, his shoes scuffed, and his eyes carried the exhaustion of someone much older. In a sudden motion, he tucked a loaf of bread and a small pack of cheese under his hoodie. He glanced around nervously, then made a dash for the door. But before he could escape, the alarm blared and the store manager grabbed his arm. In the struggle, a glass jar of preserves fell and shattered across the floor. Shards scattered everywhere, the sharp sound echoing through the store. The boy froze, terrified, not of punishment, but of what would happen to his mother if he didn't bring food home. By the time police arrived, the boy was trembling. To them, it was another petty theft. To the store owner, it was a crime. But to the boy, it was desperation. No one knew yet that this small act of stealing bread would lead to a courtroom scene so unforgettable, it would silence an entire city. A week later, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. Reporters had caught wind of the story. A teenager accused of stealing bread and cheese. On the surface, it seemed simple. But behind the charges was a community asking bigger questions about poverty, race, and justice. The boy sat quietly at the defendant's table, his hands folded tightly. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like a child. His mother, frail and pale from illness, sat just a few feet away. Every cough of hers echoed louder than the murmurs in the room. The judge entered, an older white man with decades of experience. Known for being strict, he rarely showed compassion. Yet something in his eyes as he glanced at the boy suggested this case might test more than just the law. Spectators leaned forward. Lawyers shuffled papers. The boy kept his head low, his heart pounding. This wasn't just about a stolen loaf. This was about whether justice could see beyond the letter of the law, into the heart of human suffering. As the prosecution presented the facts, the story seemed cut and dry. Theft, attempted escape, property damage. They painted the boy as reckless and irresponsible. But beneath those facts was a hidden truth the courtroom had yet to hear. The boy's father had abandoned the family years ago. His mother, once a nursing assistant, had been bedridden after a severe illness left her unable to work. Bills piled up. Their lights had been shut off twice that year. Meals often meant a single slice of bread shared between them. The boy had tried working at a local car wash, scrubbing tires and windows for a few dollars. But when he missed a shift to care for his mother, his employer replaced him without hesitation. Every effort to find help, from neighbors, from charities, from government offices, ended in disappointment. So when hunger gnawed and his mother's fever worsened, he made a choice that would forever change his life: to take food, even if it meant breaking the law. The courtroom didn't yet know this full struggle, but when the defense rose to speak, silence spread. It was time for the truth to unfold. The defense attorney, a young black woman who had seen cases like this too many times before, rose and addressed the court. Her voice carried both strength and sorrow. She explained the boy's story, the mother's illness, the lost job, the desperate attempts for help that were all met with closed doors. She spoke not just of poverty, but of systemic neglect. The boy hadn't stolen jewelry, electronics, or money. He had stolen bread and cheese, the simplest of foods, taken not for greed, but for survival. She painted a picture of a child caught in circumstances far beyond his control. "This is not a case of criminal intent," she said. "This is a case of a community that looked away." The boy sat motionless, but his eyes welled up as his story was laid bare for all to hear. The courtroom shifted uneasily. Even the prosecutor's stern face softened. The judge leaned back, his hands clasped. The law demanded punishment. But his conscience whispered another truth. Sometimes, the greater crime is society's silence. As the defense finished, the judge remained quiet. The room held its breath. His gavel stayed still, yet his eyes carried the weight of decades spent on the bench. He thought of the countless young men and women who had stood before him, some hardened by crime, others broken by circumstance. But this boy was different. His so-called crime revealed not his failure, but theirs. He reflected on the irony. In one of the richest nations in the world, a child had to steal bread to feed his sick mother. What did that say about justice? What did it say about compassion? The judge's silence grew heavy. Reporters leaned in, sensing something extraordinary was about to happen. Spectators who had entered with judgment now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Finally, the judge spoke, not in anger, but in a voice that carried across every corner of the room. And what he said would be remembered far beyond the walls of that courtroom. The judge declared that stealing, even bread, was indeed a crime. But then he turned the case on its head. He said the boy should not bear this burden alone. When a child must steal food in order to keep his mother alive, he said, it is not just his crime. It is ours. The courtroom froze. Murmurs broke out. The judge raised his hand for silence. Then, in a decision no one expected, he fined every single person present in the courtroom, including himself, $10. "No one leaves this courtroom until this fine is paid," he said. "Because today, the responsibility is shared. We have all failed this boy, and we will all help to make it right." Gasps filled the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. The store owner who pressed charges sat speechless. One by one, people reached into their pockets, dropping bills and coins into a basket the clerk carried around. For the first time, the boy looked up. And for the first time, he saw not shame, but hope. By the time the collection was finished, the basket overflowed with more than enough money, not only to pay the fine, but to provide the boy's family with weeks of food and medicine. Some even pledged to help his mother find proper care. The judge dismissed the case, but not before leaving one final message. Justice is not blind. Justice sees suffering. And when it does, justice must act. The boy and his mother walked out of the courthouse hand in hand, tears streaming down their faces. For them, this was more than a verdict. It was proof that compassion still had a place in a world often too cold. Outside, cameras flashed, and headlines the next morning carried the story nationwide. But beyond the headlines, it left an echo, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of courage and compassion can ripple into something much larger. And perhaps the real question the judge left hanging in the air was this: in a society where no child should have to steal food to survive, what are we, each of us, willing to do to change it?